A house divided, dissected. How many times has the average American heard the term Dred Scott decision? Assuming you're not an uninformed peer, the answer should be yes. By understanding the then potential U.S. Senator Abraham Lincoln's speech, A House Divided, we can truly appreciate the value of his words. He did not only influence colonial Americans' mindsets regarding slavery, he created the basics of modern civil rights movement, which in turn became a leading entity in a snowball of factors, which ultimately combined with other key rulings induced the Civil War. Freedom is not bought, it is won with sly attraction and cunning luck, something we should always keep in mind. The Dred Scott decision, as stated on dictionary.com. A controversial ruling made by the Supreme Court in 1857. Shortly before the outbreak of the Civil War, Dred Scott, a slave, sought to be declared a free man on the basis that he had lived for a time in a free territory. With his master, the court decided that under the Constitution, Scott was his master's property land, was not a citizen of the United States. The court also declared the Missouri Compromise, which prohibited slavery in certain areas, unconstitutionally deprived people of property, their slaves. The Dred Scott decision was a serious blow to abolitionists. Very bad decision. As stated in unbodfiles.wordpress.com, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. To Lincoln, the Kansas-Nebraska Act overturned a settled presumption that slavery, being wrong, eventually would die out. He believed that the nation's founders shared that presumption and acted upon it, accepting slavery where it already existed, but since they believed it to be wrong, doing nothing to permit its spread. In contrast, the Kansas-Nebraska Act implied a stance of moral neutrality so that it did not matter whether slavery was expanded or curtailed. This prospect rekindled Lincoln's passion and his interest in politics and led him to campaign vigorously in the 1854 election for Illinois' Whigs, who were opposed to the Kansas-Nebraska Act and committed for its repeal. Lincoln's prospect, as stated in PBS.org. Lincoln believed that the recent Supreme Court decision on the Dred Scott case was part of a Democratic conspiracy that would lead to the legalization of slavery in all states. Referring to the court's decision which permitted Dred Scott to live in a free state, yet remain a slave, he said. What Dred Scott master might lawfully do with Dred Scott in the free state of Illinois. Every other master may lawfully do this with any other one, or 1,000 slaves, in Illinois or in any other free state. By his clear-cut anti-slavery rhetoric, Abe's message is as transparent as Caribbean waters. One way or the other, the fighting will stop. Either both sides reach civilized agreement by negotiations, or force will be evenly enforced in an attempt to push their own view of the right thing to do into law. A house divided against itself cannot stand is a notion that Honest Abe took straight from the Bible, as stated in Matthew 12:25. The people have to make a choice, compromise or obliterate the opposition. The speech attempts to coax the audience to thoroughly contemplate the consequences of their decisions while simultaneously emitting strong rays of anti-slavery bias. He opposed mainstream close-mindedness and challenged it with eloquent passive aggression. By setting such a clear conservative line between himself and his opponent, President Lincoln clearly conveyed opposition to slavery. He took a moral iron fist to fully enforce the true meaning of the Constitution, freedom. This speech not only rallied support for Lincoln's potential presidential goal, but also informed the very heart of that of the civil rights movement, meant to the future of our personal rights as an individual. He broke a barrier of which other men were too cowardly to speak up against, or still had their brains encased in a ball and chain box, and refused to acknowledge. The speech gained the devotion of certain masses by planting his message so deep into the consciousness of all who listened, One could not help but let the words simmer in thought. Whether you agreed with him or not, his words struck to the mind like flies to crap. His anti-slavery enthusiasm gave motivation to future generations. He founded the thought of complete and total freedom, by speaking his view. It will and forever continue to be a symbol of our true origin and the nation's core view of life, the land of the free. My conclusion is, when all is said and done, Abraham Lincoln took a stand and devoted himself to a cause he believed in. He refused to sit idly by while the Democratic Party, piece by piece, disassembled the most important ingredient of the United States. He fought with all his power and through words and his actions accomplished his goal and made the U.S. what it is today. Abraham Lincoln is the man to admire, and his speech really made a difference in this country.